Those who have pursued the unseen were seen as cursed. Sometimes they were. More often, they were victims of a cruel church, a ruthless ruling class, and ignorant minds. We, however, live in a different age. Do not fear, seeker of the unseen. Today is a new dawn. The dawn of the Dragon Jinn.
Hello, my name is Aristomenes and welcome to Dragon Jinn Alchemy. This would be the fourth installment of my series of discourses, which are open-ended, and at this point they involve general information on the topic as well as occult information, peripheral occult information that may be relevant to the topic. If you'll recall, the last video was about what benefits one might get from doing Dragon Jinn Alchemy. The focus was, what are the benefits of association with the Dragon Jinn, with the spirits? Now, when somebody goes about these things, and I'm talking about these in a normal manner and not as some woo-woo zone. This is an art. It's the art of, well, they call it conjuring. But in this case, I would say it's a transformative and alchemical art of association with non-corporeal entities, with formations that are not physical in nature, that essentially there's very little tangible information about them. There's lots of legend and there's lots of experience that's mostly subjective. The thing is, there's a lot of bias around the issue. Some would say that, these entities lead to possession, they're manipulative, they're tricksters. Some would say that this would be dangerous. And I would agree that there are challenges and dangers to the traditional path of conjuring as it's stated, especially with the biases of the Christian religions. Even shamans had to undergo rigorous training in order to associate with the non-corporeal, whether it be the spirits of the dead or spirits of nature, or celestial spirits, or spirits of the proverbial underworld. There's a whole cosmology here. And in the Mediterranean and the Middle East, due to the urbanization of society, the shamanic practices had changed. And so there was a state religion involved, and there was a hierarchy in society that was more rigid and structured than in the rural areas. And so you had all of this influence the dynamic of occultism, and it may have caused greater dangers than were exhibited before. But in the past, for the most part, except for associations with one's own ancestors, I mean, you see that in cultures where they sometimes relate to nature spirits, sometimes they relate to leave an offering somewhere for the protection, or pray to the souls of the dead. They even do that today. So the common person, to an extent, had interacted with the unseen. But, the deeper level interactions and associations were done by, shall we say, professionals. Now, the thing about Dragon Jinn Alchemy, it doesn't jump you into an interaction in the classical sense, in the sense of, I'm going to conjure a being, I'm going to make a pact, and it's going to give me some money and fame and this and that. That's what I wanted to say. There are benefits, but also it is true that an interaction that's clumsy is going to have a backlash for the most part, because you're dealing with forces of nature. It's like somebody coming to a foreign country and just talking to anybody on the street, either begging for money or just giving them gifts and expecting something in return without knowing the customs. So there is a process here, and that's why we call it, that I call it Dragon Jinn Alchemy. First of all, the jinn are not your normally associated jinn of the traditions. There's a different process here. It's an innovation of the traditional process. I'm not making it up, but you might say, but it's been forged, shall we say, in combination with tradition, my own experiences, deeper level meditations and associations with states of consciousness that are pure, I would say. And I've spent years testing them and making sure they are pure. You might call them divine connections, communions, stuff like that. This is not about associating with dangerous forces and going off half-cocked. So, and it took me many years, in fact, to choose to share this experience and structure the system in such a way that I am sure is guaranteed that if you just go by the simple directions, shall we say, at least in the rudimentary sense, then it's safe. There are fail-safes here. Again, the jinn themselves are not dangerous because they have a modified connection with the summoner, with the interactor, with the shaman. Because when you do this system, although the term it's a new agey term right now, and it doesn't quite apply technically, but you might as well call the person, I don't know, I don't want to call somebody a magus or a sorcerer, or, there's too many connotations. So let's just say a neo-shaman. And even there's connotations, but, you got to start somewhere. So, or the operator, but that sounds too technical. So anyways, in this video, I'm going to get into some more of the benefits, and if time allows, I'm going to extrapolate the traditional process of summoning, the stages of it, the basic stages, to give you an idea what's involved and what's behind it, if time allows. Otherwise, we'll leave it to the next video. So again, I want to review that the reason I'm expressing certain metaphors is because they give you an idea of how this thing is involved. There's a lot of distortion here. There's a lot of rumor. In tradition, shamanism was associated with insanity, with trauma. So if you go through a trauma or go insane or have a crisis and you overcome it and you come back from it, then you're basically ready to go through a shamanic process because you've been stretched, shall we say. You're not stuck on your preconceptions. You're not stuck on your conditioning. The same thing, when you go and practice meditation or energy work, it works on your programming, on your socialization. It works at a physiological level on your internal programming, so you become more flexible. Your psyche becomes more flexible. Otherwise, it can strain. And some people, when they associate with occultism, especially in the traditional manner with rituals that don't quite look to raise the level of consciousness or purify the psyche, they can experience a certain form of post-traumatic stress. And especially if there are belief systems and there are conditionings again and programmings and forms that are based on guilt, blame, and fear, then you have, even if you say, well, I don't believe, I don't want them, the subconscious may still bring that up. It may still become a self-fulfilling prophecy because you're vulnerable to everybody else's belief systems around you at the same time. There's a certain, shall we say, resonance, although that's another word that, is supposed to be scientific, but it can be new agey. So, but it's effective. It describes something. I mean, there's a congruence here. We do get influenced by those around us, by family, by friends, and not just when they talk to us, but shall we say, energetically, as an esotericist would say. That just means that it's an unseen influence. Call it a subliminal influence, In any case, I wanted to, start with this. And from here, I want to again remind you of if you haven't seen the previous videos, look at them just at least to get an idea of some of the ideas, of some of what's expressed. For example, the idea of the flame analogy, that traditionally, in accordance with the Quran, for example, human beings are creatures of earth and water, of mud and clay. So the earth part is the physical body, the container, like the lamp. The water is the fluid, the fuel in the lamp. And this is basically the energy reserves of the person. There are Oriental terminologies as well that describe this stuff and describe it very well. And so I will use Oriental terminologies and the paradigm of Taoist alchemy and Nei Kung for some of the practices here that are meant to ease the connection and guarantee the safety of the person. Again, I speak of safety, but it doesn't mean this is dangerous. This is to lubricate the wheels and to ensure that the process is healthy. The thing is that these entities may test a person. They want to make sure that you can handle them. That's why if you have friction with the first one and something doesn't seem right, then you can drop the whole thing and there's no problem. That's the agreement, basically. So in any case, aside from the earth and water, you have the fire, the form of the fire and its heat, but the light of the fire, the actual inspiring light, the divine light. So you might say, well, a rudimentary infrared type light goes with the flame itself. But the heat of the flame is what I'm talking about, the power of it, the power to mobilize atoms, to heat them up, to make them move. And then you have the light, which only at a great intensity does it also exhibit this power. But if you did that, then it would kind of stress the material plane. It's almost like nuclear energy. But the high frequency has a lot of inherent energy with it, so it needs to be at a very, very low amplitude. In comparison to the low frequency, which has a higher amplitude, so it can be felt on a different level. For example, if I felt the heat of the lamp exactly as it's coming out from the filament, it would burn me a lot worse than the heat of a stove. If they had the same amplitude, the same intensity. In any case, the angelic portion, or what I would call the angelic portion, is the light, the divine light, connected to the higher consciousness. Then, of course, everything is divine. But in the consciousness sense, I'm speaking now. Then we have the mobile, active, astral, or emotional energy, the electromagnetic energy, if you want to use another pseudo-scientific term, because we really don't know. I really don't know what it is. Nobody can really prove what it is. Even if you measure it, you're not sure that that's the effect or not an indirect other. It's just, it doesn't even matter per se, and there is some contention of, are these beings just all in your head or on a mental level? Are they like personified ideas, or are they actual tangible energies, experience? And the folklore says that they are tangible experience. I mean, you see them, interact with them. The stories say you can make babies with them, that kind of thing. So, which doesn't mean that the babies are going to be materialized and human. They might be babies on another plane of existence. So there's a lot of things that are paranormal here, and we will explore them more deeply. Dragon Gin Alchemy takes many traditions and puts them together, but not in an arbitrary or ad hoc manner. It does it because the Goetia, the first book of the Lesser Key of Solomon, is full of holes. And at the same time, it is meant to be completed. I mean, the holes are there that connect with something. And you can actually organize it in a way that's complementary with all these other systems. In my honest opinion, it was made for this time period. So to continue the discourse, let me just say that cultivation is the foundation of Dragon Gin Alchemy. That's why we call it alchemy. It is not dragons in summoning. Why alchemy? Because in order to really work with the spirits, in fact, in order to work properly with the spirits and not have to be messed with, you need to relate to the spirits in such a way that you don't really need the spirits anymore. That a part of you will be able to activate, will be able to awaken, that is self-similar to what the spirit represents. You see, King Solomon, you look at the myth, and the myth is a symbolic depiction of guidance. It is a symbolic instruction set. It says, okay, Solomon here, which is, I interpret as a title, not really a person. There isn't any archaeological proof that such a man ever existed. But that's another debate. I don't even think I ever want to get into it. But in any case, this Solomon persona, this title, this person is a man of completion, a man of peace, A man has gone through things. That's what the name means. It's Shalomo. And it means that this guy essentially has accomplished something. He's a master. So the master in this case wants to build a temple. And the temple to the divine is essentially the temple of the human individual. The divine connection of the master to the world and God and goddess and whatever. Basically wholeness. So the master builds, cultivates, transforms themselves, and they build and establish a place where divine communion can be common, can be normal, can be natural, can happen without hindrance. A sacred spot, a spot specialized. And what is the divine? It is not just this person that sits there and it just has happened to design everything and create everything and we have to obey them. This is not a religious perspective. It is a mystical perspective. And it is a pragmatic mystical perspective because the definition of magic, aside from the modern sense about being conforming reality to your will, etc., is really applied mysticism. For me, magic is applied mysticism. And mysticism without being applied is just an experience apart from the world. So when you are a mystic, when you have experienced the mystical in the sense that it becomes normal for you and natural and commonplace, then your interaction with the world will be magical. It just goes. 1 + 1 = 2. It's just the way it is. By definition, as I understand these things. So, the cultivation is essentially not to go and forge a relationship with entities so they can be your servants or so you can do things with them because it's cool or whatever, or to avoid it because it's a risk. The whole situation is to establish a relationship that is temporary with the entities and eventually, and even though it may last years, but it's temporary, and essentially you get something, they get something. And as long as you establish a clear-cut understanding of what everybody gets, and that's built into the system, shall we say, then the exchange of energy is defined that way. Because the exchange is defined that way, it's almost like carving a track. A river flowing through a certain course, a water course, it doesn't diverge from it. You have to pump a hell of a lot more energy to make the water overflow the banks, and even then it doesn't go somewhere else. You have to dig a new track, and that's a lot of trouble, And entities need human beings to actually do those things. The connection does. Entities can't just attack anybody. They can create mass calamity, And if the collective unconscious is receptive to them, that's almost like inviting them in. If you buy into a social myth, for example, that the demons are everywhere, and whatever, and if you talk to a Muslim and you're a Christian, the devil's going to get you, just something like that. If you buy into something like that, it can be a self-fulfilling prophecy. You actually set yourself up with certain belief systems. At the same time, I wouldn't run away from such things, belief systems like that. So, it's like, well, you know what's going on, you perceive something, you have a feel for it, so you don't have this, don't even say it's going to bring evil on my head. No, not that kind of paranoia. That's not what I'm advocating. However, the point is that cultivation strengthens you. Just like cultivation starts with a seed planted in the ground, and a plant grows and bears fruit after the flowering, and you partake of that fruit, and it nourishes you. And then the seeds come out, and you replant them, and so the plant gets to propagate its own species, and you get to be nourished by the plant. So it's a win-win scenario. This isn't the type of cultivation where you actually eat the plant itself. The plant gives you nourishment, and then you are able to cultivate and replant and recultivate. So whatever each dragon jinn has, in this case, as it is defined or established, becomes a part of you as a natural expression of you. It's like, you want wings, you want to fly. The wings are your wings. Nobody just gives them to you and then you take them off and you're not renting them. And you're not making a deal to hold them for a certain amount of time. Now the thing is that cultivation involves relationship with the entities. It involves personal potential. And personal potential and this relationship with the entities reflect spirit and matter aspects of the system. Now, what does that mean? That means the spirit aspects of the system are the entities themselves, they're the symbols, they're the experiences of consciousness. The matter aspects of the system involve your own relationship with yourself, your own health, what's going on in your body, and especially your energy field, because the energy experience, the sensate experience, is not, it's biophysical, it's biopsychic, you might say. I mean, this can be measured through your own biochemistry and your nervous system. So it is technically a physical effect, but it is experienced as an energetic effect. And this is the bridge between the material, the raw, dense material, and the spiritual, because mind and matter connect through energy. But the energy itself is like the water element, is like the fuel of the lamp. Without the fuel, there would be no fire that's associated with the lamp. So, as I will be conveying this, what's going on here, you have a certain dynamic of information in order to be able to benefit from this cultivation. You must be informed, and then cultivation practices are involved, and then these cultivation practices lead to an inner strengthening and a skill set that allows for activation. And the activation essentially is the manifestation of the experiences with the entities when you know, well, I feel something. Something's happening here. This is this. That's that. And I have to say that a lot of, for most people, these are so subtle at first that you would definitely wonder if you're just imagining them. Or maybe some people don't go into such things because they feel, well, I'm just cultivating my imagination, making myself sensitive to my own imagination and fooling myself, and hence going crazy. And that's one of the, shall we say, hindrances, or one of the tests, It's like, look, if you can develop something in you that you trust, that is your reality standard, then you're okay. If you can say, well, no, I can tell the difference between something in my imagination, a dream, for example, and what is reality. They're not so close together. If I'm that fucked up, then my brain doesn't perceive reality, really, and I never knew the difference. But even if my brain does get messed up, I will remember what reality was, and this hallucination thing is not the same. And yet we see that people with brain damage cannot tell the difference often, depending on the brain damage. So it's not like there's a guarantee that cultivation is going to make you skilled in this and comfortable with this, and that's why we say, well, this might not be for everyone. It certainly isn't for everyone, I would say. It's definitely for somebody who's past 18, who's an adult. It's definitely for someone who is not on meds. Other chemicals, I won't go either way. I won't endorse and I won't stay away. But I would recommend that you remain lucid, in cultivation practices, just like you would for meditation or anything else, because this does involve meditation and some breathing and energy work and stuff like that. And it's not some hokey pokey, new agey thing either. These are very, very specific, and there's a reason for them, and there's a magical reason for them. There are correspondences here involved between elements, energies, sensations, and the more abstract levels of description. So when you align these things, and then you have experiences that take on a life of their own. So when they take on a life of their own, you know that you're not really fueling it. They go on their own and they're doing things and they feedback with you. So you're in a relationship with something that isn't your own ego talking back to you. And again, somebody might say, but that's insanity. Well, yeah, if it's your own ego talking back to you. But the thing is that, you can't step back and say, well, I'll just, step back and test this without being involved in some way to make sure it works. You can, even if you ask somebody else to do it and observe them, you won't see anything that's different from somebody talking to themselves. You may see coincidences increase in their life. You may see difficult to explain situations. Sometimes you may witness, somebody's healed when we didn't think they could heal. Or perhaps, look, that guy predicted something and it came true. Coincidence. Things like that. Or this person seems like their IQ went up. Seems like they have a greater understanding of things. Seems like, that person was accident prone. Now they're not. certain things that are not so obvious. But as the experience of that person goes along, then they will acquire a certain sense of understanding that, okay, I don't need to reveal everything that I'm doing here. I don't need to go and tell everybody every step I'm taking. There's a thing with occultists. They say to keep silent. You don't waste your energy on justifying yourself. You know what you're doing and why. This is why these entities, when they're connected with higher intelligence, when they're crowned, as I say, you can call them, shall we say, that they're not the same as just, there's a flame with a light, a luminous flame, a coherent flame, and a flame that's in resonance with your own inner fuel. It just doesn't feed on you. It also depends on that fuel. The nature of the fuel defines the nature of the flame, and the nature of the embodiment, the nature of the self, defines the nature of the flame. Because we have an alignment between the flame of the dragon jinn that are crowned and shall we say more enlightened in a way. Their purpose is more specified toward integration and temple making without having to coerce them in the name of some grand divinity, which wasn't just a Christian or a Jewish practice. I mean, pagans did that too. They there was a whole, you better do this or else type of thing in some kinds of rituals. However, in this case, this will not be necessary. Things have been prearranged, shall we say, and perhaps it will become clearer, and that's why I'm making a lot of videos. These things need to be laid out. This system uses a lot of innovation. But at the same time, such innovations have been done before. Not the same ones, but, similar. And so, and if they're not done right, then they can lead to a situation that might look nice and is pretty colorful in a New Agey type fashion and is good for a fantasy novel or a science fiction novel, but kind of falls flat when practice is involved or it's very weak. So here we're trying to just be meticulous. I'm not going to go out and claim I'm scientific or anything. This is still an art, much more than it is a science. However, it is a pragmatic art. Experience, it works. So if you are predisposed, and you'll know if you start. So this is for those people who want to be informed, but also those people who are interested enough to take the first steps to see if they want to take more. I'd like to talk about understanding the benefits more. I mean, what are these benefits that you get? And the main benefits, according to the myth, not according to the myth, but the myth implies that you're building a temple, okay? So why would you want to build a temple? Because you can commune with the divine, and the gifts of the divine are showered upon you. The temple itself becomes a reservoir of divine infusion, and this divine infusion, but I don't believe in God, I don't whatever, or this is heresy, So remember, this is a metaphor, this is a symbol, this is a myth. And essentially building the temple, what it does is it makes you a Solomon. You become a Solomonic individual. You become a complete individual. You become an individual who is the ruler of their domain, who is wealthy beyond measure in your own field, in who you are, and with respect to your own self. You also become wise. And so all of these abilities of a master, and also you're able to have freedoms that you didn't have before. You're able to have resources that you didn't have before. It doesn't mean you become an omnipotent being. In fact, I can't define what it means because we are all different. And the thing is, your destiny opens up in ways, if you are receptive to it, that will take your life beyond where it is now. That's one of the dangers of cultivation, if anything. It's not that you're going to have a spiritual crisis or flip out or be possessed. The danger is your life is going to change, And sometimes when you're involved with people, for example, if you're relatively young, you're not married, you don't have children, then you have a circle of friends and your immediate family, well, they might not understand you. But there's a lot of young people today where that's the norm anyways, so, that's not so much. But your friends might not understand you. You've changed. Who are you? We don't know you as much. We don't know you at all. That's because what's changed was your outlook. And so you shared a certain outlook with your friends and your outlook might change. Worse or better, that's not the issue. It's going to become more real for you, because your perspective will be deepened. So this isn't something that I'm trying to sell. It is something I'm passionate about because I believe that many of the problems we encounter today is based on something we can address within ourselves. We don't need therapies. We don't need, we do need better diets, exercise, this, that, and the other. But all of this starts from who we are within ourselves. And we can cultivate that. We are living beings, and living beings can be cultivated, enhanced, and I'm not speaking of like some possessed thing. I mean self-cultivation. Exercise makes you stronger. Nourishment makes you healthier. Sleep makes you better rested and more clear and capable, and even, and even study makes you smarter. Use it or lose it. So the temple is something that you activate within yourself through your own access that you can use. And it is something that you are. So it is your it is a change and a transformation of your own subjective experience. And that's a major thing because you are the master of your frame. Now, in future videos, I will be describing how you become the master of your frame. What does that actually mean in greater detail? But it's a big topic, and I'd have to talk for hours and hours, so I'm just splitting it up in these half an hour to 40-minute segments here. Now, look, and I need to take some notes here because, off the top of my head, there's so much stuff, that I can't contain it in one video. However, what I do want to say here, and I can say, let's see, is that you can better understand this if you kind of separate it into pieces, into segments, into tiers, into levels of experience. So cultivation essentially awakens sensations, experiences, ways of thinking, perceptions. You're talking about altered states of awareness, nothing drug-induced or anything. These are endogenous. These are natural altered states. When you deal with it with entities like the Dragon Jinn, essentially they basically keep to each of them is specialized in a certain way, and each of them can ensure that your cultivation progression occurs in segments. Instead of having one continuous experience, infusion, inner working, alchemical unfolding, instead of it being a continuous, unbroken thing that might accelerate beyond your control, if you're not careful, you have segments that say, okay, just go this part, evaluate, check it out, make sure, are you okay? Is everything all right? Take stock, etc., etc. And this involves this. Then you move on and you experience, oh, this involves that. Okay, this is my ability to sense my environment. This is my ability to sense through time. This is my ability, to think more clearly. All of these things, sometimes they bring up emotional states. Sometimes they reveal relationships in the environment. Oh, my friends. Maybe some of these friends weren't as friends as I thought they were. Things like that. And so you may be forced to face issues that you couldn't or wouldn't face before. But the forcing is far, and this happens with any kind of meditation, with any kind of, dealing with the mystical or the spiritual, in a way that defies the social consensus. I mean, you might even become somebody who would, for example, enter a religious conversion. And so from a secular type person, they become a born-again Christian. That might separate them from their friends and family. So it's not about going into the occult and a cultish type of thing. Any kind of change will and can and will create friction with your environment. So it's something one should be ready for. At the same time, if you feel that you need that kind of change, then you can try, what's going on here. So what you gain with cultivation is self-balance. Basically, all the parts of yourself that are out of kilter psychologically, psychically, emotionally, mentally, begin to enter into a more balanced relationship with each other, and hence it allows you to enter into a more balanced relationship with the world, no matter how fucked up the world is, so you can make informed changes. Your discernment in that increased sense of balance is enhanced. You cannot have a working discernment, and you need a working discernment in this crazy information age where you have so much, you don't know what the fake news is from the real news, for example. So, you need that. And, there's a lot of misinformation, disinformation, confusion. This is the misinformation age. So in any case, discernment is something that is not to be underestimated. Magical ability, yes, you will be able to perform feats of magic. No, you will be able to engage in a occult process. You will be able to have knowledge and awareness and a sense and an intuition that is beyond what you have now. Maybe not everyone, maybe people who already have an enhanced sense of intuition might not see a difference, but by and large, you notice a change. One person I know was forced to face certain weaknesses in themselves. They wanted to be more confident, blah, 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 just a simple psychological thing. And then they were forced to face that. They couldn't run away from it. And they were given to understand and discern each and every case where somebody was manipulating them, where they were weak in themselves, where they were hiding, things like that. Again, it is in the best interest of what's behind the Dragon Gin alchemy, and it's not the demonic, hateful, evil, whatever. It is in the best interest for the human being involved to become whole. Human beings are like anchors in creation. There's a lot of chaos right now. And any kind of human being that moves into wholeness harmonizes the spiritual ecosystem, shall we say, which is deeply, intimately connected with the biological, geological, cosmological, ecosystemic dynamic as well. So, magical ability will make your life easier first. And it will make it more meaningful. And there is no big-ass price to pay because you're doing the work. And the third thing is collective connection in a way where you will not be subsumed by the collective, absorbed by it, influenced by it in a negative way, except for the way it has been influencing you already. It'll be understood. It's like, wow, man, the world is fucking, I knew it was crazy, but I didn't know how much. And look at where it's being influenced, how it's influenced, where you can see currents of the mass movement, shall we say, in the collective mind, in the group mind, in the way society works. So you can apply yourself to that. And you can see how hard it is or how easy it is. You'll be able to have experience with that, Many people have questions and say, well, if you know or can do so much, why haven't you changed anything? Well, you'll be able to see why as you enter these applications. You'll be able to see why things haven't changed. Maybe not, but there's a high probability that you can. I have, and several people I know have as well. Now, in this dynamic, you do not perform a ritual on a set. It differs from the traditional system in that there's no set time, no set date. It's almost like certain forms of tantra where they say you don't need a special time, a special date, a special guru, special conditions to meditate. You can do it whenever you feel like. It's according to your own will, your sense of what's right, when and where, and all of that. That's the criteria here. In this case, your life becomes the ritual. You don't make it phony, it doesn't become something unreal, but essentially the practice is your life. So your life is the means, and from your life come the resources out of which you build the inner temple. But of course, the true resource is within you. So, there's an interaction with your environment and your own being, all of this, and you build this temple. Where is this temple? It's not something just within. It is your being itself. It is not just an empty container in a sense, but it is a resonant cavity, a vibration medium. It is a life dynamic that can be tuned or detuned or untuned from what you might call its conditioning, its brainwashing, its adverse, unhealthy socialization. But again, I'm talking about somebody who's more or less predisposed to this, who's attracted to this, who has a sense of And there's feedback with the system from the get-go, as we'll be describing it, later on. So in this case, life is a ritual, and if you are involved in activations, like say the force of Kundalini that goes up the spine and all of this, that's also much talked about in esoteric circles, although not so much in Western occultism, not at all in traditional, but in modern Eastern influenced Western occultism it is. So anyways, if you engage in this and you have a crisis, oh, what am I going to do? Well, you're guaranteed not to have a crisis, unless you have so much bottled up crap that you need to have a crisis, but it will be manageable. So these things regulate your energy, they regulate your experience in terms of keeping your structure intact and healthy. So this is a form of controlled cultivation, but in a way that the engineers are building the temple, they control the building. It's not just a bunch of workers, well, where do we put the next brick? Oh, just stick it up anywhere. No, it's all defined according to a certain process. It's not rigid though. This is a flexible dynamic. We're talking about a myth. We're not talking, the myth is not the reality. You're not building a stone edifice here. So these are intelligences, the spirits, and they're crowned intelligences. They're intelligences that are, their awareness, shall we say, has been raised, their purpose has been specialized, and they've been fine-tuned in a way. So, and somebody would say, how can that happen with jinn that are so unruly in all of this? Well, it's part of the agreement. Because essentially you don't force the whole being, this is just an emanation of the being, of a projection. The central intelligence is what it is, but our connections pass through this set of conditions where the being is specialized, where it's crowned, where its purpose becomes more solid, where it becomes more user-friendly even than it was before, So the pact essentially has already been made. So if for some reason the user, the individual working with the system is trying to screw the system up and say, well, I just want to fucking, just give me wealth and this and that and screw my enemies and, no. Just doing that is not going to cut it, because then, again, yours truly is going to end up being responsible for all the harm you do to anybody. Because, and that's another reason. It's like, I don't want to be, a lot of people just give off magical whatevers, and other people run with them and cause all kind of havoc and all kind of harm, and essentially they say, well, I'm not responsible. Well, the gun supplier is responsible for what people do with guns. They can't just, they're partly responsible. The drug dealer is partly responsible for the other person. You sell it to the wrong person, you should know better, in my honest opinion. So I would withhold expressing this knowledge, this information, until I was sure that I do know better. So, and again, maybe I'm paranoid because of the politically correct atmosphere, because of the way people address the occult, I'm just saying that, but also I've seen people flip out with the occult when they didn't have to. Part of it was the belief that they would. This is going to shut down. If you start doing that, if you start moving where you shouldn't, if you try to practice this on meds and you're half-cocked already, it's going to shut down, And then the rest is up to you, because, you will not have the information, because I am not going to just spit out information, whatever, on particular details. We'll see how that's going to work out later. But the information I give, if people are drawn to it, they can cultivate. They can initiate their own cultivation, and so it's another safety net. And you can't have enough of those, especially when you promote something new. If you promote some tradition, you say, well, the tradition's there. I'm just informing you. Do whatever you want. This isn't really tradition. This is a combination of several traditions, which I believe a tradition is a working thing, and that if you have working thing in one thing and a working thing in another context, in a third context, you can adapt those to a fourth context. That these days, the older contexts really don't apply without some form, in my honest opinion, of innovation and modernization. So, and of course, this is all at this point for purely informative purposes. I am not instructing anybody, and you probably couldn't at this point, at these 4 videos. These are just informative, and they're going to be informative for quite some time, but The discerning occultist can extract information because you have a working piece of material here. You have the dragon gin, not the dragon gin, but the Goetia. You have the Lesser Key and Solomon. It's free online. You also have the 72 names, the triple letter words in Hebrew. That's all. And you combine the two. And you follow your ritual or whatever. Do it that way. That's up to you. That's different, see? So it's not like I'm presenting something that isn't out there. I'm presenting something that is different than the tradition, has different goals, but at the same time is aligned with some of the claims that the New Age movement would say, but really the Old Age movement, the movement of the mystical traditions, for example, the alchemical traditions, the traditions of enhancing your own psyche, your own experience, and the magical traditions, extending. So it's a kind of modern shamanism, but again, that's a New Agey type term. So again, all this pertains to benefits that I cannot just list in a video or two. And that's it. I'm from here on in, I'm going to give you procedure. I'm going to give you the nature of these beings. I'm going to give you, steps you can take to experience something, and all the occult dynamics around it. And that's a hell of a lot of knowledge because it goes pretty deep and pretty extensive. There's stuff in Kabbalah, there's stuff in Indian Tantra, there's stuff in Oriental Alchemy, that needs to be combined here for the system to live up to the expectations that I have for it, that I've experienced from it to a good extent, but it's still evolving, So everything that I'm presenting now is tried and true, shall we say, as far as our experience goes, and it's workable. So until next time, thank you for listening. We'll talk again.
Those who have pursued the unseen were seen as cursed. Sometimes they were. More often, they were victims of a cruel church, a ruthless ruling class, and ignorant minds. We, however, live in a different age. Do not fear, seeker of the unseen. Today is a new dawn. The dawn of the dragon gin.